raising his voice. "But go!" the old man ordered, pointing toward the great mosque and the Kaaba. Suddenly, Rahal's feet came unstuck, and he was swept along with the crowd that moments before had flowed around him like water past a rock in a river. Over the next few days, he completed the requirements of the Hajj, but the old man's warning haunted his every waking thought. As the power of the beggar's words burrowed deeper and deeper into Rahal's consciousness, they exposed his previous beliefs as false. He returned several times to the place where he'd encountered the old man, but he never saw him again. Perhaps he was a Malik, an angel. Rahal returned to Doha and terminated the lease on the apartment in Paris where his favorite mistress lived. He began studying the Quran as never before, memorizing long passages and secretly listening to sermons by influential Shiite imams. Soon, he was utterly convinced that the Sunni heresy was a malignancy almost as great as the moral corruption of the West. The only thing that exceeded them both was the cancerous presence of the Zionists along the shores of the Mediterranean. Rahal's wife cared about nothing except comfort, and his 2 grown daughters were married to men more interested in horse racing than religion. Rahal had no son or men his age in whom he could confide. He carefully began to expand his network of connections to include those who shared his zeal and faith. "Sir," said a male voice behind Rahal. Rahal swiveled in his chair and faced a pair of wiry but strong young men in their early 30s. Khalil and Mustafa Morsi came from a well-respected Shiite family in Beirut that had fallen on hard times due to the political upheaval in Lebanon. They shared Rahal's beliefs and knew about his spiritual change while on the Hajj. A sophisticated IT expert trained in Germany, Khalil was a Hafez, the term awarded to a person who had memorized the entire Quran. Mustafa, 2 years younger, was Rahal's chief of security. Before moving to Qatar, he'd served for 5 years in an elite military unit of Hezbollah in Lebanon. The brothers looked so similar they could pass for twins. Both of them were open Shiites, but their presence as part of Rahal's entourage didn't raise suspicions because they occupied subservient roles. "You wanted to see us," Khalil said, bowing his head slightly. "Yes," Rahal said. "I want to ask you a question." Neither Khalil nor Mustafa showed any sign of nervousness or fear in his presence. It was another reason Rahal included the talented young men in his inner circle. Emotion was the enemy of courage. "Where does the heart of darkness reside?" Rahal asked. Mustafa was quieter, Khalil more vocal. "In 4 places," Khalil answered. "The soul of an infidel, the eyes of a loose woman, the land occupied by the Jews, and in America." "You've answered well," Rahal replied. "Let me add another. A traitor who betrays those who follow the Prophet." Both brothers nodded. "What should we do about the heart of darkness?" Rahal continued. "Strike it with the sword of jihad!" Mustafa moved his right hand forward as if thrusting an imaginary blade. "And who best wields the sword in my household?" "I do," Mustafa answered, standing up even straighter. Khalil put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "And together we are invincible." "Sit beside me," Rahal said, motioning to 2 empty chairs. "I want to talk to you about piercing the heart of darkness in Sharm el-Sheikh." Chapter 1. It was 3:30 a.m., and the Lord gently nudged Hana Abu Hassan awake for a night watch. Daud, her husband of 6 months, was out of the country on business. A sound sleeper, Daud rarely woke up when she slipped out of bed. When Hana asked him about it, he smiled and replied, "The sleep of the righteous is sweet." Hana rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. Daud was a good man, the husband she'd prayed for, and the soulmate chosen for her by God himself. Hana went into the living room of the 1-bedroom house where she'd lived since moving from Israel to the U.S. Turning on a lamp, she opened her Bible. A low moan came from the kitchen, followed by a series of short snorts. The source of the noises was Leon, a furry, 85-pound black and white dog who had trotted out of the woods and into Hana's life a year earlier. A random mix of big dog breeds, Leon looked like a small St. Bernard. His thick coat forced Hana and Daud to set the thermostat on the air conditioning unit a few degrees cooler to keep their pet comfortable in the humid heat of the Georgia summer. Otherwise, the dog's long red tongue would hang out of